The rain was already falling before Freddie even noticed it. It tapped softly against the window pane, like someone knocking from another life, asking to be let in. The room around him was quiet, wrapped in a gentle orange glow from a single lamp that sat on his desk. Most nights, this little studio felt like a shelter. Tonight, it felt like a confessional. The kind a person walks into when they can no longer run from the weight sitting on their chest. Freddie sat in his chair with a thick wool blanket around his shoulders, his breathing slow and careful. There was a kind of stillness in his movements, the kind that comes when a person has spent too many years living loudly and finally learns what silence really sounds like. His fingers rested on a fountain pen, slim and elegant, the same way he once held a microphone in front of thousands. Only now, instead of a stadium waiting for his voice, a blank sheet of paper waited for his honesty. For a moment, he simply watched his hands tremble, not from fear, but from truth catching up to him. The world knew Freddie Mercury, the man who could command a stage like a king, but very few ever met Farouk, the boy who left home with more dreams than certainty. And tonight, as the rain continued its soft rhythm, he felt both of them sitting in the same room at last. He leaned back, closed his eyes, and listened. In the silence, he heard echoes that never really left him: the roar of Live Aid, the thunder of Rio, the soft whisper of his friends laughing in some hotel room after a show. And beneath all that noise was something far more personal, a question he had carried for years, one that now pressed against his chest with a gentle but unshakable weight. His eyes opened slowly. The pen touched the page. The first line formed with a mixture of courage and vulnerability, as if he were finally allowing the world to see the part of him he had guarded most of his life. And as the words began to flow, Freddie realized this letter would become his most honest performance yet, a place where the man behind the legend finally spoke without fear. He told the truth the way only someone who has lived through fire can tell it. He said the nights on tour were never just nights. They were battles fought in dressing rooms, hotel corridors, and backstage corners where silence pressed hard against his chest. The crowd saw a man lit by glory, but he knew the cost hidden behind every roar. He remembered waking up in strange cities with his voice cracked, his body aching, and his spirit running on fumes. Greatness looked golden from the outside, but from where he stood, it often felt like paying a debt he never stopped owing. He spoke about the endless travel that blurred time until morning and midnight meant the same thing. Airports became waiting rooms for his next version of exhaustion. Private cars felt like moving coffins where he shut his eyes for 10 minutes just to pretend he was resting. He said the stage was a place where he became larger than life, but the moments after each performance made him feel smaller than ever. The adrenaline would fade, the applause would vanish, and what remained was a man trying to gather whatever pieces of himself he had left. He admitted that the stage gave him power, but it also took something precious from him every time the lights hit his face. It took his sleep, his relationships, his health, and even parts of his identity. He shared how he learned to smile while carrying a weight no one else could see. People cheered for him because they believed he was unbreakable, yet he often wondered if they would still cheer if they knew how many nights he cried quietly into his hands. He never wanted pity. He wanted understanding. He wanted someone to see the human behind the icon. He said greatness was never measured by applause. It was measured by the silent sacrifices made when no one was watching. It was measured by the willingness to lose comfort, stability, and sometimes even sanity for the sake of creating something that would outlive him. He believed true greatness was not glamorous. It was messy, demanding, and relentless. He compared it to a fire that warms you and burns you at the same time. To chase it meant accepting both heat and hurt. As he spoke, there was a softness in his voice, almost like he was finally making peace with the price he had paid. He did not call himself a victim. He called himself a man who chose a road few could survive. The memories played in his mind like old footage colored in muted gold, each flashback carrying the weight of 1,000 unsaid prayers. He saw himself on stage, drenched in sweat, hearing the crowd shake the walls while his heart whispered for a moment of quiet. He loved them. He loved the music. But he also knew the journey had never been free. He realized now that fame was never the real treasure. The spotlight was only a temporary glow, a flicker that came and went like a passing storm. What mattered most were the moments when he looked inward and understood who he truly was beneath the makeup and noise. The true value of his fame was not the size of his audience, but the depth of his own resilience. He found strength in knowing he had survived both the applause and the silence. As he revisited those memories, he understood something far deeper than glory. The price he had paid had taught him who he was. It had shaped his soul, sharpened his courage, and forced him to stand face to face with his own vulnerability. And for the first time, he felt grateful for every scar. There comes a time in every life when applause fades and the only sound you hear is your own breathing in a quiet room. Freddie wrote that this was when he learned who truly loved him. He said the world knew his songs, but only a handful of people knew his soul. When the illness started stealing his strength, it was these few who stepped forward without being asked. They did not come for glory. They came because they couldn't imagine leaving him to fight alone. He spoke about Mary with a tenderness that filled every line of his words. She was the constant in a life filled with storms. He said she protected him in ways the world would never understand. She knew when to let him speak and when to let silence hold his pain. When his body weakened, she became his quiet shield, guarding his dignity with a soft strength he always admired. He admitted that their bond survived fame, heartbreak, and time because it was built on something deeper than romance. It was built on loyalty, the kind that stays when the spotlight dies. He wrote about his bandmates too, men who had shared stages, fights, victories, and wounds with him. They didn't always agree, but they always showed up when it mattered most. When the crowds no longer saw him, they did. When he disappeared from public life, they protected the parts of him the world had no right to touch. They said their friendship was not loud or dramatic. It was steady, like a heartbeat you only notice when you stop to listen. Without them, he felt he would have collapsed long before the final chapters of his life. He mentioned the friends who closed their doors to the press, who shielded his home, who sacrificed their own time so he would never feel abandoned. These were people who carried his secrets carefully and never treated him like a legend needing rescue. They treated him like a friend worth fighting for. And in his letter, he wrote that fame could never repay what these people had given him. Their kindness saved him more than medicine ever could. His tone softened as he admitted that his success was never his alone.
The world saw Freddie Mercury, the performer, but these people saw the man who sometimes struggled to get out of bed, the man who needed someone to hold his hand when the nights grew cold. He wrote that he owed them more gratitude than he could ever express, and in the end, he did not remember them as supporting characters in his story. He remembered them as the ones who kept him alive long enough to finish it. With gratitude anchoring him, Freddie turned to the hardest truth he had been avoiding. There is a certain kind of silence that only illness can bring. A silence that settles into the corners of your life like a shadow you never invited. Freddie wrote that he first noticed it in the small moments. The mornings when getting out of bed